Chapter 13. It was 2:45 in the morning when Haidt was finally released, if being spat out of a concrete tomb could be called freedom. The hours in that interview room had been a kind of psychological vivisection. He'd been trapped with a man who didn't just ask questions, he peeled them, pressed them, poisoned them. Haidt had never been built for confrontation. It ran counter to his wiring, his instincts, his fear. And he was a terrible liar. That was the real curse, fearful, truthful, transparent, the exact kind of man who should never be involved in anything clandestine. Deep down, he'd known combing through Alfonso Silva's home for adherent materials was suicidal. A colder, more detached man would have stayed hidden, waited for the detective to leave, and slipped away unseen. But Haidt was not that man. He never had been. Instead, he panicked. He tried to run. He failed to exploit Detective Weber's age and slower frame. A smarter man would have fled on foot, abandoning the car and hoping Weber would dismiss it as a neighbor's. But Haidt condemned himself the moment he sprinted for the car, and worse, dropped the keys right outside the driver's door. Weber saw everything, every fumble, every hesitation, and despite Haidt's clumsy attempt to vanish back to the compound on foot, Weber came for him anyway, and he arrested him all the same. It was terrifying, actually. Weber had rung the doorbell, and some snot-nosed, college-aged recruit had opened it, then led him straight to Haidt. Haidt had no faith in the new recruits. They didn't understand the art of protecting the clergy, the unspoken discipline of shielding one another. To imagine that one of them had cooperated with law enforcement and willfully handed over a member of the clergy to someone like Detective Weber was unthinkable. Yet that's exactly what had happened. The adherents knew the truth of this world. Secular authority could not be trusted. By divine right, it had no real power over them. That was truer for the clergy than for anyone else. And yet here he was, hours later, released after being questioned to exhaustion. "Exit through here," the sign on the door read. Haidt squinted. The red ink was nearly obscured beneath a careless layer of paint. He hesitated a moment before a buzzing sound filled the air, followed by a metallic click. The lock disengaged. He pushed the door open and stepped into the unexpectedly pleasant atmosphere of the station's waiting room. Behind him came a second click as the lock slid back into place. Haidt turned and saw there was no handle on this side. The door was sealed. He was committed now, whether he wanted to be or not. He found himself in a waiting room with thin blue carpet and rows of hard rubber seats arranged in rigid lines. The far wall was stone, dominated by a large mechanical clock whose jagged metal arms seemed to jut straight out of the rock. It read exactly 2:47 a.m. Unlike most government buildings, there was no sharp scent of disinfectant or industrial cleaner, only stillness. The room was calm, almost soothing, a stark contrast to the interrogation that had left him hollow hours earlier. He hadn't been charged, at least not yet, but the threat of it still lingered like a shadow. How he'd managed to avoid it was anyone's guess. None of that mattered now. What mattered was that Haidt had no plan, no money, no phone, nothing of value, no idea how to get back to the compound, and what would they think of him when he did? His superiors already regarded him as weak and unreliable. That they had sent him at all was absurd. It was supposed to be simple: go in, retrieve the materials, get out. But if he got caught, there was a real chance he would crack under pressure and spill far more than he should. The adherents' legal team had been very clear. Any materials related to the adherents of the Divine Winds were considered borrowed property, revocable at any time for any reason he wasn't stealing, they said. He was simply retrieving what no longer belonged to the layperson. Haidt was completely alone. Even the clerk's desk behind the glass was bright and sterile, but lifeless, the chair tucked neatly in, the monitor looping a drifting department logo he hadn't seen in years. He lingered, taking in the silence, before finally stepping forward. The only sound was the soft, artificial breath of warm air through the ceiling vents. He took his first step and almost stumbled. He was that drained, his arms, chest, and legs felt unbearably heavy. He raised his right hand and pressed it to his forehead in a slow, deliberate bump. "Get it together. We've got a long, dangerous walk ahead of us," he muttered to himself. Finally, Haidt moved. He passed the rows of hard rubber seats, noting the crisp vacuum lines swirling across the carpet. Not a single scrap of litter marked the floor, impressive for a government building. When he reached the stone wall, 2 glass doors stood to his left, leading outside. He felt a flicker of relief and turned toward them. Beneath his feet, the carpet gave way to marble tile, old, polished, and beautiful. It spoke of a time when the city had taken pride in its public spaces. This floor, too, had been recently cleaned, and in the soft light, he caught a faint outline of his reflection staring back at him. Truth be told, he didn't want to step outside. The streets weren't meant for someone like him, not at this hour. Malcontents, rogues, and worse would be out there. In his white clerical suit, he'd stand out like a beacon if he had to run. He didn't even know the temperature, and he had only 2 light layers on his back. He drew a long, steady breath and pushed one of the glass doors open. The cold, damp air washed over his face, raising a chill that crawled down his spine and into his hands. He stepped through and let the door close behind him. Turning back, he saw the lock had already engaged. No way back in now. He was committed. Haidt scanned the street for landmarks, searching desperately for anything familiar. Finding none, he stepped off the sidewalk and into the parking lot, still trying to piece together a route to the compound. That's when he heard it, a voice calling for him. Summer wind. The voice cut through the night. Haidt straightened, scanning in every direction. He spun until he saw them, 3 figures beside a black luxury sedan. In the darkness, their suits lined up like a row of piano keys, 2 in white, mirroring Haidt's own clerical suit, and between them, Cardinal Nguyen in black. The Cardinal's arm extended in a subtle beckoning gesture. Haidt froze, his mind racing. How had they known where to find him? How long had they been waiting? "This way. Come closer," Cardinal Nguyen called. Haidt swallowed and moved toward them. He recognized the 2 junior clergy but couldn't recall their names, Christian or adherent. They towered over him, eyes locked on his with silent menace. Their presence was oppressive, statuesque, as if they might spring to life and crush him at any moment. His eyes darted between them as he walked, trying to mask his fear, but he knew they could see it. By the time he reached Nguyen's outstretched hand, his pulse was hammering in his ears. He shook the Cardinal's hand, watching the stern face shift into a thin, mocking smile. "Come, let's get out of the cold," Nguyen said, brushing past him. The Cardinal circled to the front of the sedan and slid into the passenger seat. One of the hulking figures took the driver's side and climbed in, starting the engine. Both men fastened their seatbelts in near-perfect unison. Haidt looked up as the other figure, the one who remained standing, held open the rear door, waiting. "Let's go," the Cardinal said. Haidt drew in a breath of cold night air that cut sharp in his lungs, then slipped into the seat behind the driver. The door closed with a muted thud. He fumbled for the seatbelt as the opposite door opened and the larger of the 2 clergymen climbed in behind Nguyen, silent as stone. The door shut. The engine rumbled to life, low and steady, and they eased out of the lot. No one spoke. It didn't take long for Haidt to recognize the route. This road would lead straight to the university district. He turned his head toward the window. Outside, skeletal buildings loomed, ruins colonized by tents, tarps, and abandoned shopping carts. In the center of one lot, 2 men fought clumsily, their blows dull and heavy. Others watched from the shadows, indifferent, unmoving. Any hope Haidt had of slipping away on his own evaporated. He turned from the window and fixed his eyes on the back of the driver's head, willing the images to vanish. His throat tightened. He swallowed hard and cleared it with a dry rasp. Silence. Cardinal Nguyen's shout cracked through the car like a whip. Haidt froze. Slowly, the Cardinal turned in his seat, his gaze cutting through the dim interior. "I don't want to hear another sound from you," Nguyen said, his voice low and lethal, "until you tell me exactly what happened." Nervously, Haidt glanced at the hulking junior clergyman beside him. The man's gaze burned into him with the intensity of 1,000 suns. Pure hatred. This stranger would offer him no quarter. Haidt's eyes flicked back to Cardinal Nguyen. The Cardinal was staring directly into him, unblinking. Panic surged through Haidt's chest. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. "You caused our veil to be lifted," Nguyen roared. "You had one single, simple fucking task, one even an idiotic moron like you could handle, and you failed, but you didn't just fail. You handed proof to the police that our clergy was involved. What the hell do you have to say for yourself?" Haidt stammered. Nguyen mocked, his voice dripping with venom. Then he turned sharply, slumping back into the passenger seat. "I should have left you where I found you." Haidt said nothing. His mind spun through the last 48 hours, trying to piece together a coherent explanation. Everything blurred. He forced himself to focus, to string together something, anything, that might save him. "Cardinal Nguyen?" His voice was barely a whisper. "What?" Nguyen snapped, his head jerking toward him. "It wasn't me, Your Grace," Haidt said quickly. "One of the kids from the school let the police in. They took them to my room. I was asleep. Your Grace." "One of the kids?" the Cardinal repeated, his voice climbing. "One of the kids? You know, Summer Wind? You're a real idiotic son of a bitch, did you know that?" His tone sharpened with each word. "Who left the car in front of the house? Who tried to run from the oldest, fattest cop in the land? Who dropped the keys next to the car like an idiot? Do you think I'm stupid, Summer Wind? Do you?" Nguyen's words hit like blows. "The police ran the tags. They're registered to our church. Don't you get it? You fucked us all." Haidt hung his head, his cheeks burning. The car rolled smoothly into the university district. Outside, stately homes glided past, their yards wide and meticulously kept. Some already boasted early fall decorations, wreaths, pumpkins, and lanterns. The streetlights burned steadily, and at 3 a.m, the neighborhood slept soundly, unaware of the storm in the black sedan. Haidt drew a breath, trying to steady the tremor in his chest. He turned his eyes back to the driver's head, blank and still. When he finally looked toward Nguyen, the Cardinal stared straight ahead, disgust etched across his face. And in that moment, something clicked, something Haidt had overlooked. "What do you mean, involved?" Haidt asked quietly. The Cardinal's head snapped around, eyes flashing with surprise and irritation. His mouth parted, but no words came. He cast a quick look at the hulking clergyman beside Haidt, then turned back toward the windshield. Silence settled thick in the car. Nguyen offered no answer. The only sound was the soft hum of the engine as they continued down the empty street. "What do you mean, involved?" Haidt said again, louder this time. Cardinal Nguyen raised his right hand and snapped his fingers. The hulking clergyman beside Haidt struck instantly, a stiff jab smashing into Haidt's jaw. His head whipped to the side, pain exploding through him. Already exhausted and weak, Haidt let out a raw, childlike scream. Another punch followed, then another. Haidt threw up his right arm to shield himself, crying out as each blow thudded against his guard. Suddenly the man switched tactics, grabbing Haidt by the shoulder and slamming him against the window. The glass rattled with each violent shove. There was a brief pause, just enough for Haidt's trembling fingers to grope for the door handle. He found it. He pulled. The brute yanked him back before the latch could catch. They grappled, bodies twisting, until Haidt's head cracked hard against the window. His vision swam. Dazed, he saw the man clawing at the seatbelt buckle, but fumbling. Haidt lashed out with his foot, catching the man squarely under the chin. The brute snarled, ripped the buckle free, and surged forward, driving Haidt flat against the seat. Haidt clawed and struck, but the man's arms were like iron. Punches and scratches that should have slowed him down did nothing. The air filled with the frantic sound of struggle, the seat squealing, Haidt's panicked gasps. Massive hands closed around Haidt's neck. Pressure built, his vision blurred. He flailed, fists hammering blindly until one strike caught the man in the eye. The brute jerked back with a grunt, the grip loosening just enough for Haidt to twist free. He shoved back, desperate, but the respite lasted only seconds. The man lunged again, crushing him down, the weight pinning him as the fight spiraled back into chaos. The fight bled out of him. Haidt let out a horrified scream, raw, animal, the final cry of prey caught in a predator's jaws. The man loomed over him, pressing down on his neck and chest. In truth, this hulking figure was no mere enforcer. He was a killer. And Haidt was finally meeting his end, helpless, pinned, and consumed. The man was more than flesh. He was every phantom from Haidt's past given form, his crushing strength, the sharp tang of cologne mingled with sweat, the unrelenting weight that promised Haidt's final moments would be as terrifying and degrading as possible. All of it spoke to old wounds. He was every tyrant Haidt had ever known, every brute who had overpowered him, laughed at him, stripped him of dignity. The ones who set their sights on the women Haidt adored, humiliating him before them, then walking away smug, only to bed those same women within earshot. The rumors always found him. They always did. Haidt had been the runt, the one denied friendship, denied intimacy. Every hope of connection tainted, spoiled, stolen by faceless predators like this one. Now, pinned to the floorboard of a car, breath slipping away, Haidt understood the truth. No one would ever know what happened here. And worse, no one would care. Haidt's vision tunneled. A tingling crept through his arms, turning to fire. He stopped struggling, halfway to surrender, when the cabin exploded with light shouts, erupted, muffled, unintelligible, and tires shrieked against asphalt. The pressure vanished from his neck. He barely registered the violent swaying before a carload of screams pierced the night. Another burst of light, blinding like a spotlight, a miracle. But not angels. God had sent a drunk driver. The crash was tremendous. All four men were flung like rag dolls. The hulking man crushing Haidt was hurled forward into the front seats. Haidt's face slammed against the driver's seat, stars exploding in his vision. Dazed, he wrenched himself free. A horn blared somewhere outside. The cabin stayed lit, bright and merciless. His ears rang. Everything sounded far away. The man who had been choking him was screaming now, high and broken. Haidt gagged and vomited onto himself in the floorboard. Instinct took over. He groped for the nearest handle, fingers finding cold metal. The door yielded instantly. A rush of night air slapped him awake. He rolled onto his stomach and crawled out, collapsing on the concrete. The chill shocked his lungs. He gasped, forcing himself upright, first to a knee, then his feet. The open door yawned behind him as he leaned forward, hands braced on his knees, fighting for breath. When he finally looked back into the wrecked cabin, his eyes met the bruised, bloodied face of Cardinal Nguyen. "Get off me, you idiot!" the Cardinal shouted, shoving at the unconscious hulk, pinning him down. "Open the door! He's there! Grab him!" Haidt staggered upright, pain flaring through his ribs and neck. He lurched around the crumpled sedan, noticing with a jolt that the collision had spun it completely around the other vehicle's front end, was buried deep in the adherent's engine bay. Neither car was going anywhere. As he circled, Haidt caught sight of the other driver, slumped halfway out his open door. Stringy hair clung to his bloodied forehead. He looked to be in his late 40s, vomiting into the night and screaming like a wounded animal. Haidt froze, keeping his distance. The man's grotesque movements, the wild sound in his voice, made him seem just as dangerous as the adherents who had tried to kill him moments before. Yet even in his terror, Haidt felt a flicker of sympathy. He wanted to be sure the stranger wouldn't be beaten, or worse, once the adherents got free. The sudden pounding against Cardinal Nguyen's door broke his trance. Nguyen's voice cut through the night, sharp and furious. The hulking man still lay wedged across him, blocking his escape. "Get back here!" the Cardinal bellowed. He managed to pop the door open, but remained trapped beneath his unconscious enforcer, glaring at Haidt with hatred in his eyes. Haidt cast one last glance at the wounded stranger, then turned and ran.